Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Uber Studios. It's been a long time since I made a video in here for you all, for your viewing pleasure. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited for the content that I'm going over today. I've been thinking about making this video for a really long time. The last piece of the puzzle finally clicked earlier today, and I have a free night, so it's just happening. And you might see some cut-ins later where, as I'm editing, I think of a better way to say something, as I am oft to do. That's right. That's correct, what I just said. But I want to just get it rolling, because one of my things is just like get a bad first draft going and see if you can fix it in the edit. And I usually can, actually. I usually can. Bravo to me. So anyway, today I'm talking about how to leave the Mormon Church. I left officially in like 2017. That's not true. I left officially July 4th of 2022, I think. I have the paper around here somewhere. That's not important. So I guess officially I left. I thought July 4th was a fun day to submit my removal, to talk to a lawyer and leave this totally easy to leave church. You know, totally not a cult church. I just had to get a lawyer and go to a notary to leave it. But other than that, totally not a cult. So as a person who has kind of been disconnected from the church for 7-ish years, who went through the process that I'm about to talk to you about, I want to give you my advice. I want to tell you how to leave if you're watching this and you want to leave, which I imagine that most of the people who are watching this right now want to leave or already left. Although it does always surprise me how many true believing active members stop by my page and then say really mean things to me in the comments and then tell me that I'm unhealthy when you're basically doing the opposite behavior that I'm doing. Like, you don't have a channel, sure, but you are searching for ex-Mormon creators and then telling us that we're unhealthy. So like, maybe best case scenario, maybe both of us are not doing too well. Did you ever think about that? Yeah, I didn't think so. So anyway, this is kind of what I want to touch on today. Because Mormonism is such a deep part of your identity when you're a member, you end up doing something that I like to call like subconscious spelunking, for lack of a, well, it's not lack of a better term. That's actually a pretty fucking goddamn good term. Congratulations to me for thinking of it. Yeah, so this, I don't know why I got so aggressive right there, but I'm going to keep it in. I'm going to edit that back in. Pretty fucking goddamn good term. Congratulations to me for thinking of it. Psychological subconscious spelunking. It's a lot of, I would say a lot of S's, but one of those was a P, so that's fun. To talk about this, I think I'm going to need to change the scenery a little bit, but we'll get there. This is the point that I want to make. I'm already so scatterbrained, it's unbelievable. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It feels good, doesn't it? We're all firing on all syllables. We're all we're firing on every cylinder and syllable. When you are born into a religion like Mormonism, you don't really have the chance to like accept and consent to all of the little pieces of worldview that are being thrown at you, and you are kind of forced to buy an ideology wholesale. You just get it. In fact, you don't even actually get to buy it. You just inherit it, and it's yours now. The most obvious example of this is, 8-year-old kid decides to get baptized because that's what his parents want him to do. I was the kid in this situation, but I'm sure you were too. You are given this way of seeing the world, but you didn't choose all of the little pieces that make it up. And then one day when your frontal cortex actually works, you're in a place where now you're justifying all these things post hoc. The information has basically been installed instead of spending the years with a newly developed prefrontal cortex where you're going to decide all of the things that you believe and all of the things that you think. You are figuring out how to justify the things that you inherited. So it's different. This is why a faith crisis can be so good. Even a faith crisis where you feel like you want to leave the church and you decide not to and you decide to stay, at least that, in my opinion, let's say somebody learns all the history and decides, I still like it here, at least now they're not operating on kind of pre-installed software. They're operating on things that they chose to bring into their mind and keep and defend. So I want you to imagine this, right? You're in a cave, you're spelunking. Boo. All right. You're in a cave and you have to flip over all of these rocks to see if you want to keep them in the cave, right? You're in your subconscious. You grab a rock and it's chastity. So now you decide, do I throw the rock? Do I get a new rock? Do I say, hey, I'm actually okay with this level of modesty that Mormonism wouldn't have been okay with, but I'm okay with it for me? Or I'm okay with this level of physical intimacy with somebody if I have emotional intimacy that matches it. You set your boundary wherever you want it to be. So do you throw the rock out or do you keep the rock? Then you get to, I don't know, the word of wisdom. I will choose that these substances are okay. This beverage is okay. This is not okay. These are where my new lines are. Leave no stone unturned. You get to pick up all of these stones and inspect them before you decide if you want to keep them or get rid of them. So once you're down here in this cave, there will be some rocks that maybe you don't want to touch. Maybe you feel like they're too scary to touch. I kind of have the mentality of, you're already down there. Why not rebuild from the ground up and come out of this faith crisis stronger than you were before? That's kind of my ideology here. And now this is where it kind of loops into Jordan Peterson and 12 Rules for Life, and I want to give my take on writing rules for your own life, which I'm going to get into right now. All right, so magic how I turned that light back on. You see that? It's impressive. I messed up my chair. I made these rules for myself because whether you realize it or not, Mormonism gives you rules from the get-go. It's very difficult to throw out that rule book and not have a new one enter into that vacuum. Very difficult. Something that I see frequently is in the process of leaving Mormonism, if you don't do the work to fill it back up with something that you think is a productive new worldview, people will often allow something like a really, really intense political belief to be their new thought process. And political beliefs are kind of like the branches of a good ideology. And when I say good, I mean, that's not the right word. I mean like a well-founded or like at least a firmly built ideology. Whether it's a correct or incorrect ideology is a different story. But if it has a foundation, then political urges and impulses will naturally grow out of that. But to try and say, I'm going to make it so that the roof of my house is actually the foundation, I think that that's a misstep. And so this is where I kind of want to add my 2 cents. And it's not unsolicited because you clicked on the video. So I want to say 2 more things about this kind of portion before you move on to my rules. I kind of want to build a couple of ideas from the ground up here. The fuel of Christianity, so to speak, and the brakes of Christianity, in a sense, are sins and sacrifices. In Christianity, giving like the broad view here, sacrifices are typically things that bring you closer to God, and a sin is a thing that puts you further from God. It's obvious, but those are basically the compelling forces, so to speak. And I think that we can track kind of the birth of sacrifice in early human societies. I think that agriculture and the agricultural revolution kind of kick-started the idea of sacrifices, because for the first time in their lives, those early humans weren't just eating grain or whatever. They realized that if they saved some of it, they planted it, they waited, they nurtured it, they could sacrifice immediate consumption for the reward of a greater thing later. And it almost gave them a sense of control in a weird way. Then this weird thing happened where sacrifices were no longer just for like laws of nature, planting and gardening types of things. Suddenly it was a way in early Judaism, for example, where you could sacrifice an animal and forgive the sins of a community. Or, the Mayans would sacrifice a person at the top of their pyramid, and it would maybe get rain for that season or something like that. It makes sense that humans would eventually ask this question, which is, what would be a big enough sacrifice to fix everything forever always? Sacrificing a goat, or sacrificing, the most pure and the youngest and the cleanest sheep that we have in our herd, for example, that does pretty good, but we still have to do another one next year. And Cain and Abel started with this, right? Sacrifices from the beginning. Humans are immediately saying, like, what type of work is the best kind of work? What type of sacrifices will do the job? And it makes sense in my mind that Christianity said, well, a perfect person with no blemishes, who's actually God himself, that sacrifice would justify everything forever, always. And so we have this idea of a sacrifice, right? And then a sin is basically just the antithesis of that. But what if these crazy ideas that have become some morally coded words could be condensed down to their most simple parts again, and then we could use them in a way that's actually useful as ex-Mormons, instead of just like, sin doesn't exist. You see a lot of people in the just leaving religion phase who say the idea and concept of a sin in general is bad and it needs to go. I've never heard someone say this where they're not basically just referring to sexual sin. You would be hard pressed to find somebody in the ex-Mormon community say that who's what they really mean by that is, I should be allowed to be racist, or I should be allowed to abuse people, or I should be allowed to lie and cheat. Nobody means that. They simply mean the sins that Mormonism told me were sins, I don't think are sins anymore. And so that's an example right there of a rock that was in the cave that, instead of throwing out all the way, we should redefine that rock. That's a perfect example. Here's my secular definition of sin and sacrifice, and this is why I have chosen to leave these stones. The interesting thing here, actually, that I should touch on is, once you go down into that cave and you flip everything over and you come back out, which is the hero's journey in a weird way, that's a fun one to play with. It's not your subconscious anymore, because you went through and you inspected it. And so now it's just your conscious. And so you can get to know yourself a lot better by spending some time in those deep corners. Fun side note is that in the quest for the Holy Grail in the old story, King Arthur instructed all of his men to enter the forest looking for the Holy Grail in the place that looked the scariest to them. And Jung talked about how the thing that you want most will always be where you least want to look. So just some fun stuff for you there. Fun seeing you on the other side of that. But you'll be happy that you confronted those demons. And the earlier, the better. But anyway, so my definition of sin and sacrifice, I'm sorry this is taking me so long. I keep getting reminded of why I wanted to make this video so bad. A sacrifice is when you save a little bit of today for a better tomorrow. That's it. A sin is when you spend a little bit of tomorrow for a better today. I think you could build a whole moral and an ethical code around this. One of those is sustainable. Just logistically speaking, you could do one of those things forever, and you could not do the other one forever. You would run out of gas eventually if all you did was sin. And at this point, sin is no longer a morally coded language. It's simply something that, based on the interests that you define for yourself, takes from those future interests and does not replenish.
Yeah, fuck! If I taught you anything, I taught you to replenish!
Thank you, Rick Glassman. That's a sin and that's a sacrifice. Now, as we get into why you should make up your own rules, I want to touch for a moment on Nietzsche. Obviously, this channel is an ode to Nietzsche. The Übermensch was the thing that would come after humanity and would be better than humanity. And so the Uber-Mormon is, we could all be the Uber-Mormon, so to speak. And the thing that would take all of the good rocks that we decide to leave in our conscious caves. Whoa, that's actually a good way to say it. Conscious caves. I hadn't come up with that until right now. But you have subconscious spelunking, and then when you leave, it's just your conscious cave because you know it's down there. Pretty fucking goddamn good term. Congratulations to me for thinking of it. We take all of those rocks that are useful to us and we just use them to build something that gets us to where we want to go even more. Nietzsche talked about slave morality and herd morality. What he really criticized was this herd mentality, where somebody will basically inherit a way of thinking, a way of viewing the world from their culture and from their parents and from those around them, and they will not question it. They will just take it and they will just run with it. And I would be willing to bet, because I think I have the most reasonable subscribers on YouTube, would be more frustrated with a person who simply accepted the ideology that was handed to them with no questions. We would be more bothered by that, even if they were not Mormon, right? Even if they were born into a secular atheist family and just like went with it and just like, yeah, don't need to question this, versus a Mormon who questioned it and decided to stay. That's probably a bold claim, but that's how I feel. I want people to question. Nietzsche called these people free spirits, and he thought that we needed them to break away from the inherited morality and take time to actually decide what they believe. These free spirits are kind of like the precursor to becoming the Übermensch. Okay, so we need to come up with our own rules. So now that we've laid all the groundwork here and we've literally built from the cave up, and the cave is obviously Plato's metaphor as well, but now I want to share with you my rules and I want to talk through them. And this comes with an invitation. Imagine a life that you would be thrilled to live every day. Ask yourself, what type of person would earn that life for themselves? And then break it down modularly until you're left with a few rules that will hopefully get you there. It's basically, I use this example constantly on this channel, but you're typing the address into Google and you want the car to take you there. Well, what are the turns? What are the rules that are going to get you there? Here we go. Here are my rules. I hope that you enjoy them. I thought about them for a long time. I have 12, which is why I brought up Peterson in the first place. It was funny. At first, I was going to do a video just about me stealing his idea about writing 12 rules. But then he wrote another 12 rules. And then I was like, so you didn't write 12 rules. You wrote 24 rules. Boom, roasted. I don't know. I'll cut all of this out. Number 1, question your motives and your desires continually. That's the rule. That's the cave thing, right? So that makes sense. No explanation needed. Think out loud and on paper. Embrace the idea of being wrong as part of the path to being less wrong. I used to work at a place, and one of the core values was basically like, we think that we're doing things well. We never accept that we found the best way. We're always going to be curious enough to think that maybe there's a better way to tweak something. Maybe we could optimize something a little bit and make it a tiny bit better. There's humility there. There's curiosity there. Those are attributes that I want to have in me because I like those attributes in other people. Don't kill your bad ideas before they have a chance to become good ideas. I could go on about this, but sometimes you have these desires that bubble out of us, and sometimes we come in with such this negative voice that kills it immediately. Wouldn't it be nice if you could be patient enough with yourself? Everything that bubbles up, give it a chance to turn into something before you just say no. Define failure early enough to prevent it. It doesn't have to be a perfect definition at first. As you're doing these rules and you are imagining the life that you want to live, that's your carrot. You want to really detail out, in a perfect week, how many hours am I spending at work? How many hours am I spending with my family? I would ask you questions like, how much time am I spending on my phone? Decide with percentages, if I could build something from scratch, where would I be allocating all of my time? And then do the opposite. If I was living in pure hell, what would my life look like? How much time would I be spending at work? And because now you have an image of a thing that you want, and you have an image of a thing that you don't want. And so now you can actively run towards something. But you can also actively run away from something. And sometimes you can run a little bit faster when there's a wolf chasing you. And sometimes you can run even faster when you're running towards $1 million and a wolf that's chasing you. And so that's kind of the thought process. There's a lot of mining going on here. There's a lot of spelunking happening. You're digging deep into your innermost desires and you're questioning them, and then you're elaborating upon them. There's a case to be made here that you could create something like a form of generational wealth. And it could be money, but it could also not be money. Sometimes generational wealth is just education that you wish that you had received younger. Small, preventable catastrophes will always hurt more than enormous, unpredictable tragedies. I think sometimes in the back of our minds, we know exactly where a problem is going to come from. And we know exactly where the dragon lives, so to speak. And it would be so much easier to go in there and just prevent it, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That was a famous Ben Franklin line. I see this in simple everyday things. I'll be on that terrible part of I-15, which most of you will know that that's the freeway that runs north to south in Utah, but maybe some of you, I can't imagine who, doesn't know that. Right around the point of the mountain in Lehigh and Draper, you will get a crack on your windshield if you drive there. Just so you know, that will happen to you. You can either go get the little chip filled immediately, and it's done, and it's not going to become a problem, or you could let it go across your whole windshield, and then you could get a new windshield for 7 times the cost. And that's awesome. That's fun. You have the power to choose which one of those options you're going to take. And I know that sometimes life will throw a whole bunch of shit at you at once, and it feels like you're just going to have to let everything go off the deep end. But then you have everything off the deep end, and then your dishes are going crazy, and you can't clean your house, and you can't even find the vacuum to try and clean the house, and you don't have any clean dishes left to cook with, and so now you have to just go buy food, but that's 4 times more expensive than cooking at home, and so now you're slowly beginning to spend more than you make, and it all gets out of control. So killing the baby dragons is the way to go, in my opinion. And that goes right in hand with this next one, which is, I don't know who said this, but I heard it once and it was brilliant. Bad news doesn't get better with age. Go in there, stab that baby fucking dragon in the heart, and rest easy, because now you know it's not going to come kill you in the middle of the night. You're welcome. Next rule. Nobody is going to solve your problems for you. If they do, it's because they think you are weak. Nothing left to say on that one. The next one. I don't even know what number we're on because I didn't number them. I said number 1 and number 2 at the beginning, but it was easier to keep track then. Don't judge me. You can only create future stability if you are maintaining present stability. Put out daily fires before you even try to prevent future fires. Okay, the financial example is the easiest one here. If you're up to your eyeballs in debts, does not make sense to try and put some money away in some sort of retirement/investing account, because mathematically speaking, this is where I will get nerdy, all those current interest rates are probably worse than the one that you're trying to get for yourself, right? You're probably losing 18% on a credit card, and if you're going to get, factoring in inflation, 7 to 8% in the market, then you're going to lose 10% for every dollar you invest. That doesn't make sense. You have to pay off the high stuff. You have to create present stability before you can even try to create future stability. Next one flows from that. Improved living generates compounding improvement. Once things are level, after the dishes are done, after everything is put away and you're in an environment where you're kind of at a net zero, it becomes a really exciting open question, which is, how big of a sacrifice could I make so that I could have like a nice little rest period for a while? How far into the future could I plan my meals? How far into the future could I stock the pantry? How far into the future could I prevent catastrophe is really the open question here. It gets fun at that point because you're like, how could I spend all of this capital that I just earned for myself in a way that gets me more capital, in a way that's the most sustainable, and that really helps me achieve the goals that I have decided are important goals for me. Don't resent people for not being able to read your mind. You will actually just resent yourself for not speaking your mind. In the early books of Genesis, it basically says that God spoke everything into existence. If you want to fix things that are going on in your life, you have to start from the lowest hanging fruit. And there will always be enough low hanging fruit that you'll never get to the stuff at the top of the tree. The stuff at the top of the tree, this is where the metaphor fails, but the stuff at the top of the tree is already fine. You don't need to fix it. There's enough chaos in your life as it is right now that you could generate a pretty damn good life if all you did was turn that into order and you never even touch the stuff that's already mediocrely ordered. As a human being on planet Earth, it's 100% predictable that you have a long list of problems that are plaguing you. Some of them are plaguing you a lot, and some of them are plaguing you a little, and that's the least amount of chaos. That's the closest to order that your problem will get. And so what I like to do sometimes is I like to make a list of everything that's bothering me, and then I like to separate it into two categories. The first category is what would be the easiest thing for me to do right now. It's like if I just put my head down and I spent 5 minutes working on this, it would be done and I could check it off my list. The other side of the list is what would move the needle the most. Where are the bottlenecks in my life, and how impactful would it be right now to get this bottleneck out of here? Let's say, for example, that your garbage can hold like 3 things, and then you have to empty the bag and take it out and put a new bag in. So it's going to be really hard to clean your house if every time you throw the 3rd thing away, you're like, ugh, I got to take that out again. Go get a bigger trash can. Remove that bottleneck. So yeah, this is why I like to have an easy to do and move, how much does it move the needle category. This also relates to very heavily if you go into the personal finance world, and you will hear the 2 methods for paying off debt. You'll have the snowball and you'll have the avalanche, right? The snowball is where you line everything up from smallest to biggest and you just pay off the smallest stuff and then you roll it into the next one. The avalanche is where you take the thing that's hurting you the most, the thing with the highest interest, and you attack that first, and then you move to the next highest interest. They're both great ways of doing it. Your personality might cause one of these methods to resonate with you more. Oftentimes, what ends up being probably the most productive is after you actually visualize everything, you create a new order of things where it's like, okay, this thing's really easy, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to use the momentum from having finished a task, and I'm going to go to this thing over here, which is the biggest impact item on my list. And you work through it like that. You can fix a lot of problems by simply vocalizing them. In a relationship, there might be something that you have been wanting to talk to your partner about for a long time. Not only does bad news not get better with age, they're never going to read your mind. The only one who can have a play here is you. Humans are made in the image of God, according to Genesis. And according to Genesis, God is the type of thing that can see chaos and rectify it with words. Okay, last 2 rules. This one is really just a quote that I love. It's from The Alchemist. If you haven't read The Alchemist ever, or if you haven't read it in the last year, go read it. It's great. Every blessing ignored becomes a curse. A faith crisis is a blessing. An opportunity to dive deep, to reassess, to take inventory of everything that you've kind of been sold. An opportunity to choose a new path if you want it. That's a huge blessing. Not fully taking advantage of that blessing, not fully digging deep and just spending the mental and emotional capital to set things right when it's brought to your attention that they are not right. To look back forever and say, I never fully recovered from that. That would be a curse. So the last rule is, and rule is kind of loose at this point, but love your imperfect self, or you will risk never meeting your perfect self. I heard once, heaven is a place that's perfect at getting better. And if you've noticed, basically all of my rules are like minor improvements. Like, can you make things 1% better a day? I'm speaking for me here, but my perfect self wouldn't want to meet somebody who's too judgmental to give my imperfect self the time of day. As you accept your imperfect self, you kind of become your perfect self in a weird way. The crucifixion and the atonement and all of those represent a paradox. And Jesus, when he said, whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. If a person just sits in their house because they're too afraid to go out and experience life, they never leave, they stay safe, they keep everything sterile. There's a case to be made that maybe living a longer life and a safer life isn't living. Jesus, the hero of the story of Christianity, because he chooses to give up his life, he gets his life back and he earns everybody else's life back. And so accept your current self the way that you are in the situation that you are in. Just accept it. And then take inventory of where you are along the path to getting to that version of yourself that you would consider to be a perfect version of yourself. That, my friends, is how you leave the Mormon Church. Thanks for watching. I love you all. Take good care of yourselves. And I'll see you in the next one.